Hi, my name is Stan Ledford. Most people call me Preach. This is a video series that goes along with our book, You Are a Picker. In this video series, I'll be giving you a little more insight of what happened and why we said what we did and why we looked at the things the way we did. I thought, what better way to do this than for me to just sit here at my kitchen table and begin to share my heart with you. I would love to be there in person where I could, but time, space, everything else kind of makes it difficult sometimes. However, I can do it by video. And so I want to invite you to just pull up a chair to my table and let's just begin to visit for a little while about You Are a Picker. This will be a 13-week series of videos. We have 13 videos in all that begins to take a look at each chapter. Whenever you begin to read each chapter, you'll kind of see real quickly what we're talking about. I try to keep it as simple as possible. Let me kind of share with you a little bit about how You Are a Picker got started. My wife and I, Mama, have been working with folk in jails and prisons and with drug addicts, alcoholics, ladies who have just been having some problems. And we've been doing this for a long, long time. And our background started out years ago with working with youth, working with teenagers before we become pastors. And one of the things that I began to do was tell a lot of these young ladies that were in our youth group and coming up along, I would tell them, you are a picker. You get to choose. You're not one who is laying on the produce or the sales rack, but you're the shopper. You're the one that gets to go through and look. You're the one that gets to go through and pick. As you begin to see our ministry begin to grow and grow and grow, we were in Thornton, Texas. I say that Mom and I went to Texas. We served time down in Texas because we actually preached inside jails more than we did at the church we were pastoring. And while I was there, we began to have opportunity to take our drug and alcohol program into the jail, the county jail there at Groesbeck, Texas. And in the process of it, I would begin to preach 4 or 5 times depending on how things went. We either got to do all the ladies at once, or we'd have to do maximum security ladies and then medium and minimum security ladies. And that was kind of our favorite time of the week, was going into Thornton County. We ministered in the maximum security, medium security, minimum security, and then we went over to the lady side and began to talk with them and share the gospel with them. It would take every once in a while, someone would come along and then we'd get somebody new who were coming through, and in the course of one of our meetings, one of the ladies would say, "Hey, Sally's new. She hadn't got to hear your picker story yet." And so about every 6 weeks or so, I had to retell my picker story for everyone who was coming in. And my picker story went a whole lot like it does in the book in that first chapter. I began to talk to the ladies and tell them, you're a picker. You are a picker. The problem is with a lot of the young ladies is they lose that sense of, I get to choose somewhere along the way. Sometimes they don't lose it. Sometimes it is stolen from them. Sometimes it is taken away from them and they didn't have a choice. And sadly, that's what happens sometimes in today's society. The choices are taken away from us. And so I would tell my picker story pretty much what you read in the book about how that you're not the bananas, you're not the tomatoes, but you are the one who is shopping. You are the ones who gets to take care of and who begins to try to you're the one that gets to make the choices. You have put your blood, your sweat, your tears. You got up early in the morning, you went to work, you argued with the boss, you done everything that you did at work to earn that money so that you can have the choice. And if you take the time to make those choices about the food that you buy to take into your home, why not make it even more of a choice about the relationships of individuals that you're going to allow to come into your life? To me, that is something that is more important than the bananas, whether they're green or they got black spots on them, or the tomatoes, whether they're green or whether they're soft or overripe. Because what you do with your life is going to begin to dictate what happens in your future. You make bad choices now, those choices are going to continue to multiply and continue to multiply and continue to multiply. Whereas if you start making some good choices now, things will begin to straighten up. Things will begin to do better. Whenever that I started to write You Are a Picker several years ago, I started out, and as the process of writing You Are a Picker, I decided that I had read enough books, and whenever that I would read a book and I would look at it and I would say, man, I wish I'd have just read the last chapter, the last paragraph or two of that chapter, instead of all of the fluff and all the mess and everything else that they put during the chapter. I'm thinking, man, I wish I'd have just read those last two paragraphs of that chapter, and I would have known everything that they were saying, and it's all clearer there in the ending to begin with. And that's what I did with You Are a Picker. When you begin to read each chapter, it is like taking those last 3 or 4 paragraphs where the author is trying to sum up what they have said in that entire chapter and begin to bring it to light and boil it down, so to speak. That's what we try to do with You're a Picker. I tried to make it as easy to read as possible, as short as possible, because I wanted you to grab a hold of what we're saying and what is being said, what is happening there. I want you to be able to understand that you are the picker, that you get to choose, that you're not just waiting for somebody to come by and pick you up, but you get to choose. What happens a whole lot of times is early in your life, people steal from you. People take away from you that self-confidence, that little girl voice inside of you. And they take it away from you, and in the process of taking it away from you, you begin to lose that idea that you are the picker. You begin to lose that ideal of, I get to make the choices. And that's the one thing that may be the hardest for you to get back, is for you to begin to say, wait a minute, time out. I want to choose. Every time I think that I've heard the worst story that I could probably hear, I get to hear another one. And ladies, one of the things that I have found out through this process of many years of ministering is that regardless of how bad the story is to someone else, it is the worst thing that could have possibly happened to that person. So we can't sit around and compare sin. We can't sit around and compare hurts. We can't sit around and compare scars. But what we can do is we can decide we're going to stand up. And we're going to walk away from the places where we've been. And we're not going to let Satan begin to tempt us anymore. We're not going to let Satan begin to cause us to have problems anymore because of the wrecks that we may have been involved in the past. We have to begin to stand up and begin to say, no, this isn't happening the way that it has in the past. I am taking charge of my life. I'm taking charge of my life. I've had so many ladies come up to us and begin to share with us details. And not everybody's ready to share all of the details at any one given time. You may be sitting in a class with 5 or 6 people or even more, and you may be saying to yourself, you know, how I can't let these people know what happened to me. I can't let these people know how I had made bad decisions, or I can't let these people know how I was abused. And you'll find out something through these videos. I try to cut through the junk and go right to the meat of the problem. That's my style. I try to cut through all of the fluff. You may not be able to say, I was abused. You may not be able to say, things happened that I wished hadn't. I've only come across one lady who just looked at me right in the eye and told me, nope, nothing ever happened to me. Nothing ever transpired. Nothing. Only one has done that I didn't believe. I've had a few tell me that, and I believed them, but I only had one tell me that I didn't believe. Too many signs that I see. Too many characteristics of someone who'd been abused is what she was at. We're not going to compare horror stories, because I tell you, I've heard some horrible, horrible, horrible things that have happened to some ladies just like you. Everything from their father beating them with an extension cord, raping them with a 32-ounce Coca-Cola bottle that we used to have back in the 70s, on and on and on. So you know what? You're not by yourself. That's what Satan tries to do, is tell you, you are by yourself when you're really not by yourself. You're not by yourself. Others have walked along that same pathway that you're in. They've walked there. They've been there. The thing of it is, we humans all feel like that we have to cover up, because if somebody else knows what happened to us, if somebody else knows our secret, what will they think? How will they look at me? Well, first off, they won't look at you any different, because they have their secret. Because they have their place, and the place where that they were abused, and how they were put through hell. They've got their own hell. And what happens is, whenever that you find someone you can trust to share that story with, then you're going to be able to back up and say, hey, time out. I'm going to share with someone who'll, number one, keep their mouth shut, and number two, who you can trust. And as you share your story with them, I'll cover this later in the book. I'm trying to give you an overview here in this first video. As you share your story with them, as you begin to share that, each time you share it, it gets a little easier. And it gets a little easier. And you get to that spot where you understand, I'm not by myself. I am not by myself. And see, this is one of the things that Satan tries to do to you, is make us think that we are by ourselves. You're the only one. What will this do to the family? Who cares? Because it's time you get healed. It's time you get healed. have a scar on my arm that I got when my son was about 2.5, 3 years old. Across the street from our house, there was a mule that his pasture was across the street, and my son liked to pet Tombstone, and so Tombstone would come up to the fence, and my son would pet him, and we got to where we'd buy 2 or 3 packages of carrots every time we went and got groceries. And every day I would take my son Kramer out, and we would have a carrot. Tombstone would come up there, and we'd feed him the carrot, and Kramer would scratch his nose. And sometimes Tombstone was a little ornery, and he'd want to eat the carrot, but he wouldn't want to come up. And so I would just reach through the fence and grab a hold of the halter thing they had on his face, and I just kind of me tough pull him up to the fence, and he'd come up there, and Kramer would feed him the carrot, and we would pet his nose, and we'd done that a few times. Well, one day, instead of reaching over the top of the fence, I reached through the fence and grabbed a hold and was going to muscle him up to the fence so my son could pet him. And he jerked his head back and showed me that he had been only letting me pull him up, that any time he had the strength and the abilities to have done anything he wanted to. I was so blessed that he didn't decide to take off running across the pasture, because he had jerked me and Kramer right through that fence. It's a barbed wire fence. One of the bobs on the wire caught my arm, and I have this big scar on my arm where I should have went through and tried to let me try to get it up here where you can see it. I don't know how well that camera will pick this up, but I have this scar right here, and this scar that's right here, I should have probably went and got some stitches in it, but I didn't. And it got wide, and it got a scab on it, and it healed up. And here's the thing about that. My body is built just like yours, in that I always get these backwards, but I think it's the white corpuscles who begin to attack in any infection, and I think it's the red corpuscles that begins to form the scab and begins to form the healing process. And so I went through the healing process. The only thing is, it left a big scar on my arm. Now, a big scar is there to show that I was hurt once. That big scar shows that I had some pain. I had a traumatic thing happen to me. Of course, kids will run up to me, "Hey, Preach, how'd you get that scar on your arm?" "No, I got a knife fight when I was a kid." Teasing with them. Of course, I tell them the truth. But you can look at that and see that, hey, I had a hurt. I had a scar. I had some pain. But our emotional scars, nobody can see those. They're on the inside. They're in a part of our bodies that can't be seen. And with this scar that was on my arm, once in a while I'd be working or whatever, reach over into an air conditioner. I used to do heating and air conditioning, or reach over, reach behind something, I'd knock the top of it off, and we had to start all over again. And that's the same with the emotional scars that come into your life. The tops get knocked off. The hurt is there again. Sometimes it was 50 years ago, and other times it happened 10 minutes ago. And that's what we have to kind of understand, is that these hurts, whether emotional or physical, they heal kind of the same way. They take some time. They have to fight off some infection. They have to fight off some outside things trying to come in, some germs. And then whenever that we begin to give it some time, these emotional scars will also begin to heal. they'll begin to heal. They'll begin to scab over. But the scar is still there. The scar still shows where the hurt is. The scar still shows where the pain is. The scar still shows what had happened to you. The only thing is, you're the only one that sees the scar. You're the only one that sees the scar. You're the only one that knows what's there. And you have to try to keep that emotional scar hid. Because you feel like if anyone else knows, it'll make you vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, you won't be that, you think you'll be an easy mark. Somebody that someone can just walk over and walk on. So, you try to keep your scars hidden. But Jesus, when he was talking about things like this, he said that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to heal the sick, to raise the dead, heal the lame, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, to preach the gospel to the poor. I'm paraphrasing, but then he said this. He came to bind up those who were bruised. The thing with the bruise is people see a bruise and they don't think anything about a bruise. Oh, you got a bruise. Oh, I hate that. That's horrible. Now, if you had a broken bone, oh, I'm concerned. You need to go to the doctor. Especially your bone's sticking out. It's broke. How you know? The bone's sticking through the skin. I know you're broke. If you had cancer, oh, people would feel bad for you. If you had anything else that was a visible hurt, people really feel sorry for you and they try to help you. However, when you have a bruise, it's just a bruise. It'll be okay. Well, people who say it's just a bruise have never had a bruised rib, where every time you breathe it hurts. Where every time you had a thought it hurt. It hurt if you hold your breath. It hurts if you breathe. You have to breathe because you can't hold your breath. It just hurts. And a bruise hurts. And then you start having an automatic impulse and an automatic flinch to protect it. Anyone comes close to your bruised rib, you start pulling up and protecting. If you've got a bruise, oh, don't, be careful. I got a bruise here. I don't want you to hit me. I bump it. It hurts. I don't want you to make it worse. And so that's what happens physically. Now let's take it over to the emotional part, because that's what happens to you emotionally. You have a bruise, and because you have a bruise, you try to protect that area where you've been hurt, and you vow in your heart you're never going to let anyone hurt you like that again. And so you have the bruise, and you keep people away. You keep people shoved out. You protect yourself, and you don't let anybody get close. But remember what Jesus said. He's coming to heal that bruise. He's coming to set you at liberty. He's coming to set you free. And if you let him set you free, I'm telling you, the book says he whom the Son has set free is free indeed. I have a deal in the book that I tell that's later on, but I feel like it fits in right here that I can just kind of tell you. If you hadn't read that far along, you'll get there eventually. My son said something to me one time as we were playing a video game. He said he went into coaching mode. He and I, when he was growing up, we played video games. We wrestled. We played. We done this. We done that. but we were always our own play-by-play color commentators. And so, I threw a big long pass on the video game, and I was really rubbing it in. He could go all the way, and I done it 80 yards down the field, and just really throwing up. And I'm just getting after him. And he made the touchdown. He dropped his controller, and he starts walking around. He goes, "All right, boys." He went into coaching mode. "All right, boys. We can't change the past, but let's go change our future." And it went off in my head. And I have been using it probably 30 years. I can't change your past. It happened. I'm sorry it happened, but it happened. I can't change your past. But Jesus can change your future. But you have to let him. You have to let him into your heart. You have to let him begin to minister to you, and let him change you, and let him heal you. I'm going to pray for you. Hey, Lord, as I come before you, I thank you and praise you for your many blessings. Lord, I worship you because of who you are and all that you have done. And Master, I just ask you now in the precious name of Jesus to begin to reach down to the ladies who are watching this. And Lord, I ask you to reach in and begin to touch and heal in those places where they need healing. Touch and heal in those areas that are bruised, that need your healing touch. And Lord, I just ask you in Jesus' precious name to lift them up high above the shadows, above all doubt, and above all fear. Lord, touch them physically, spiritually, emotionally, and financially. Lord, restore what the enemy has stolen from them. And I ask you to do these things in Jesus' precious, holy name. Now then, ladies, I'm going to throw out something here for you to discuss. Your leader of your group also has some other questions, I'm sure, that you can begin to talk about and discuss and begin to exchange ideas on and thoughts on. But I'm going to ask you, do you see yourself as a picker? Someone who chooses? Or do you see yourself as someone like a banana or like an orange or an apple or tomato, someone who's just laying on the counter waiting for somebody, whoever wants to, come by to pick you up? And if you don't see yourself as a picker, why not? Why not change that today? Today, change that. Discuss that among yourselves. How do you feel? Be honest with each other. How do you feel? How do you feel? And if you don't feel yourself as a picker, what can you do to change that? How can you encourage someone that's in your group, they're with you? How can you encourage them to start seeing themselves as a picker? Now, I'm going to tell you something. It may take you a little while to outlive a reputation that it may have taken you years to have building up or gotten. It may take a while to get that reputation to outlive it. But you can do it. You can do it. But you're going to have to start seeing yourself as a picker. Hey, we'll look at chapter 2 next week. Look it over, read it over, come ready. Come ready to begin to discuss it, begin to come ready for the lecture, come ready to share with one another. Ladies, I'm telling you, sharing your story is the beginning of your healing. Amen. We'll see you next time.